When I saved the richest man in America from choking to death in my diner, I expected gratitude, maybe even a generous tip. Instead, his first words weren't "thank you." They were, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." My name is Celeste Rivera, I'm 28 years old, and this is how one moment of doing the right thing nearly cost me everything I had left to lose. I work double shifts at Maple Grove Diner on the rough side of Denver, serving coffee that tastes like burnt hope and scrambled eggs that have seen better decades. Most nights, I drag myself home to my 8-year-old daughter Zara, who's been fighting leukemia for 2 years now. Every dollar I make goes toward her medical bills, and every prayer I whisper is that tomorrow's treatment will be the one that finally works. My younger brother Win lives with us too. He's 24, chases his dreams of making it as a musician, and honestly, he's good enough that I believe in him even when the rent's 3 days overdue. We're barely hanging on, but we're hanging on together. At least we were, until the night Donovan Blackwood walked into my diner. You've probably heard of him. Tech billionaire, worth more than some country's entire GDP, known for making ruthless business decisions that destroy companies before breakfast. What you probably don't know is that he's also the kind of man who keeps detailed files on everyone who's ever crossed him, and he has a very long memory for grudges. I had no idea who he was when he sat down in booth 7 that Tuesday night. All I knew was that a man in an expensive suit had walked into our rundown diner, ordered black coffee, and started making phone calls loud enough for everyone to hear. Phone calls about shutting down medical research facilities. Phone calls about cutting funding to experimental treatments. Phone calls about destroying the exact program keeping my daughter alive. And then, just as I was processing the fact that this stranger was about to murder my daughter's future with a signature, he started choking. Right there in front of me. The most powerful man in America, turning blue, gasping for air, and suddenly completely helpless. I had maybe 5 seconds to make a choice. 5 seconds where I stood there, knowing that if I let him die, Zara's treatment would continue. 5 seconds where the darkest thoughts I've ever had whispered that maybe sometimes fate handles justice better than mercy does. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't let another person's child grow up without their father, even if that father was about to take mine away from me. So I saved him. I performed the Heimlich maneuver, dislodged the food, and brought Donovan Blackwood back from the edge of death. And when he looked up at me, his eyes weren't filled with gratitude. They were filled with rage. He read my name tag slowly, deliberately, like he was memorizing it. Then he spoke those words that still give me nightmares. "Celeste, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." I thought he was just shaken up from nearly dying. I thought maybe he was embarrassed about being saved by a waitress in a rundown diner. I had no idea that I had just signed my own death warrant, not literally, but in every way that actually mattered. Because Donovan Blackwood doesn't just destroy his enemies. He destroys everyone who makes him feel vulnerable, even the people who save his life. Especially the people who save his life. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything went to hell. Every morning at 5:30, my alarm would scream me awake, and I'd stumble through our cramped 2-bedroom apartment trying not to wake Zara. She needs all the sleep she can get between treatments. I'd kiss her forehead, feel for fever like I do every single morning, and whisper the same prayer I've been whispering for 2 years. Please let today be a good day. Maple Grove Diner sits on the corner of Colfax and Nowhere, surrounded by pawn shops and check-cashing places that smell like broken dreams and desperation. The vinyl booths are held together with duct tape, the coffee machine sounds like it's dying a slow death, and the health inspector probably gave up on us sometime in the 90s. But it's honest work, and honest work pays for chemo treatments, even if barely. My hands tell the story of my life now, permanently stained with coffee, burned from grabbing hot plates too fast, cut up from washing dishes when our dishwasher Jimmy calls in sick. I used to have soft hands. I used to paint my nails. Now I keep them short and practical because vanity is a luxury I can't afford when every tip could mean the difference between Zara getting her medication or going without. The math haunts me every night. Zara's experimental treatment at Harmony Medical Research costs $3,000 every 2 weeks. Insurance covers 60%, if we're lucky, 40% if they're feeling creative with their denials. That leaves me scrambling for $1,200 to $1,800 every 14 days just to keep hope alive in my daughter's bloodstream. Wynn tries to help. God love him, he really does. He'll pick up odd jobs between gigs, loading trucks or moving furniture, anything that won't wreck his guitar-playing hands. Last month he made $200 playing at a wedding, and he handed me every penny without me even asking. But his dreams are valid too, and someone in this family should get to chase them. His band, Midnight Theories, is actually good. Good enough that I believe they'll make it, even when I'm calculating whether we can afford electricity this month. Our apartment is a testament to creative poverty. We've got a couch from Goodwill that's more springs than cushion, a kitchen table with one wobbly leg that we've learned to work around, and exactly 3 matching plates. Zara's room is the only space that doesn't scream struggling family. I made sure of that. Her walls are covered with drawings she's made during chemo sessions, bright purple butterflies and rainbow unicorns that remind me that childhood should still exist, even in the middle of all this. The hardest part isn't the money, though. It's watching your 8-year-old daughter handle needles better than most adults, seeing her comfort other kids in the treatment center, listening to her ask if she's going to die with the same tone she uses to ask what's for dinner. Zara has this way of patting my hand when I cry, like she's the parent and I'm the child who needs comfort. That breaks me every time. The day everything changed started like any other. I left Zara with Mrs. Chen next door, a 70-year-old retired nurse who refuses to take payment for watching her. Win had a gig at some dive bar across town, so he was already gone. I walked the 6 blocks to work because the bus fare adds up, and I need every dollar. Tuesday nights at Maple Grove are usually dead. A few truckers grabbing coffee before the long haul, maybe some late shift workers stopping by for pie and complaints about their bosses. I was wiping down tables, running through my mental math for the 100th time that day. Rent was due in 4 days. Zara's next treatment was in 6 days. I had $47 in my checking account and maybe $12 in tips from the early shift. That's when I saw it. A black sedan, so clean it looked like it had never touched actual road, pulling into our pothole-riddled parking lot. The car cost more than I'd make in 3 years. It didn't belong in our neighborhood, and it definitely didn't belong at our diner. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor, and sometimes the worst days of your life start with something as simple as an expensive car parking outside your workplace. The man who stepped out of that sedan looked like money incarnate. Crisp charcoal suit, silver hair perfectly styled, shoes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no, never worrying about bills, never wondering if you can afford your next meal. He was everything I wasn't, and he wore that difference like armor. He chose booth 7, the one in the corner with the clear view of the entire diner. Smart choice for someone who probably made enemies as easily as he made money. I grabbed my notepad and walked over, putting on my customer service smile, even though something about him made my skin crawl. "What can I get you tonight?" I asked. He barely glanced at me. "Black coffee, nothing else." "No please, no thank you." Just a command delivered to someone he clearly considered beneath his notice. I poured his coffee and tried to fade into the background, but that became impossible when he started making phone calls. Loud phone calls. The kind where you can't help but overhear every word, and every word made my blood run colder. "The Harmony Medical Research Facility," he said into his phone, stirring sugar into his coffee like he was discussing the weather. "I want their funding pulled by Friday, all of it. I don't care what kind of research they're doing or who it helps. They refuse to sell to us, so now they get nothing." My heart stopped. Harmony Medical Research. The place where Zara gets her experimental treatment. The place that represents our last hope for keeping her alive. This stranger was talking about destroying it like it was a minor business transaction. "I don't want to hear excuses," he continued. "Find a reason. Environmental violations, tax irregularities, I don't care what you have to fabricate. Just make sure they're shut down permanently. And make sure everyone knows what happens when people don't cooperate with Blackwood Industries." Blackwood, Donovan Blackwood. I'd heard the name before, usually followed by stories about companies that disappeared overnight and people whose careers ended for no apparent reason. The tech billionaire who treated human lives like chess pieces and never seemed to lose a game. I stood there holding that coffee pot, listening to him casually order the destruction of my daughter's future, and I felt something break inside me. Not break like shatter, but break like a dam bursting. All the fear and desperation and rage I'd been holding back for 2 years came flooding through me at once. He made 3 more calls. The first was to someone about buying the building that housed 4 different medical practices, apparently just to evict them. The second was to his lawyer about destroying a whistleblower who'd exposed safety violations at one of his factories. The third was to what sounded like a private investigator, giving instructions to find something on a city councilman who'd voted against one of his development projects. This wasn't a businessman. This was a predator who fed on other people's misery. The diner had gone quiet. Even Jimmy in the kitchen had stopped clanging pots. Everyone could hear this man casually discussing the destruction of lives, and nobody knew what to do about it. What do you do when you're face to face with that much power and cruelty? Then Charlie Morrison, a truck driver who comes in every Tuesday for meatloaf, decided he was hungry. He ordered from the neighboring table while Blackwood was still on the phone. Charlie's a good man, always tips well even though I know money's tight for him too. He was halfway through his steak when Blackwood finished his calls and noticed the plate. "That looks better than it smelled," Blackwood said, reaching over and cutting off a piece without asking. Charlie was too shocked to protest. Hell, we all were. Blackwood took a bite and immediately started coughing. Then the coughing turned violent. His face went red, then purple. He was choking, clawing at his throat, his eyes bulging with panic. The most powerful man in America was dying right in front of me, and I had the power to save him or let him go. For 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours, I stood there frozen. This man was about to murder my daughter with his greed and cruelty. If he died right now, Zara's treatment would continue. Justice would be served. Sometimes the universe handles things better than we do. But then I looked at his face, terrified, human, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't let someone's father die even if that father was a monster. I performed the Heimlich maneuver just like they taught us in the mandatory first aid class the diner required. 3 sharp thrusts to his diaphragm, and the piece of steak flew out of Blackwood's throat like a bullet. He gasped, coughed, and sat back down heavily while the other customers applauded. Charlie patted my shoulder and said, "Good job, honey." Jimmy even came out of the kitchen to make sure everyone was okay. But Blackwood didn't say thank you. He stared at my name tag for a long, uncomfortable moment, then looked directly into my eyes with an expression I'll never forget. Pure, cold hatred mixed with something worse, calculation. "Celeste," he said, his voice still raspy from nearly choking, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Then he left $50 on the table, walked out to his sedan, and drove away into the night. I thought he was just shaken up, maybe embarrassed that a waitress had to save his life. I had no idea I'd just signed my own death warrant. The attack on my life started exactly 72 hours later. I should have known something was wrong when my manager Derek called me into his office before my shift on Friday morning. Derek's a decent guy who's been running Maple Grove for 15 years. He knows I need this job, knows about Zara's treatments, knows I've never missed a day of work in 3 years. "Celeste, I'm sorry," he said, and he really did look sorry. "The diner's been sold. New ownership takes over Monday, and they're bringing in their own staff." "Sold to who?" "Some company called Mountain Vista Holdings. They paid cash, way more than this place is worth. I tried to put in a good word for you with the new management, but they said they weren't interested in keeping any of the current employees." I felt the world tilt sideways. "Derek, I need this job. You know I need this job." "I know, honey, I'm sorry. I really am." That weekend, while I was scrambling to find new employment, Wynn came home from his regular gig at Sullivan's bar looking like someone had punched him in the stomach. "They canceled the residency," he said. Just like that, said they were going in a different direction. Sullivan's had been paying him $200 a week to play acoustic sets 3 nights a week. It wasn't much, but it was reliable income we desperately needed. Did they say why? The new owner wants to focus on sports instead of live music. Apparently someone bought the bar yesterday and is turning it into a sports bar. A chill ran down my spine. Someone bought Sullivan's, who? Some company, Rocky Mountain Entertainment or something like that. 2 businesses, both sold within days of each other, both connected to me and Wynn. That couldn't be coincidence. The third blow came on Monday. Our landlord, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on our door with papers in her hand and tears in her eyes. She'd been our landlord for 2 years, always understanding when rent was a few days late, always patient with our situation. "I'm so sorry, Celeste," she said. "The building's been sold. The new owners are renovating all the units and they need everyone out within 30 days. Mrs. Patterson, we can't afford to move right now. Isn't there anything? The new owners paid me 3 times what this building was worth. I couldn't turn it down, But they were very specific about wanting the building empty, no existing tenants. She handed me the eviction notice. They said anyone who didn't cooperate would face legal action. I looked at the letterhead on the notice. Alpine Property Solutions, another company I'd never heard of, but I was starting to see a pattern. That night, I sat at our wobbly kitchen table with my laptop, researching every company that had suddenly entered our lives. Mountain Vista Holdings, Rocky Mountain Entertainment, Alpine Property Solutions. 3 different companies with 3 different business addresses, but when I dug deeper into public records, they all had one thing in common. They were subsidiaries of Blackwood Industries. Donovan Blackwood was systematically destroying my life, and he was just getting started. I called Harmony Medical Research, praying that Zara's treatment would be safe, that this nightmare hadn't reached that far yet. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Rivera," the receptionist said. "Our funding's been pulled. We're shutting down at the end of the month. All patient treatments are being discontinued immediately." Everything I loved was disappearing, one piece at a time, and I finally understood what Blackwood had meant. Saving his life had been the biggest mistake of mine. I spent the next 2 weeks becoming an investigator. Every free moment between frantically job hunting and caring for Zara, I researched Donovan Blackwood's past. What I found made my blood run cold. 17 people over the past decade had crossed him in minor ways and suffered complete life destruction. A safety inspector who'd cited one of his factories ended up divorced and homeless. A journalist who wrote an unflattering article lost her job and couldn't get hired anywhere else. A city councilman who voted against his development project faced tax audits, personal scandals, and career ruin. But I also found something else. His assistant, Quinn Morales, had been with him for 8 years, and Quinn's daughter had been one of his early victims. A promising young architect whose firm refused to work with Blackwood Industries suddenly found herself blacklisted from every major project in the city. I took a massive gamble and called Quinn directly. When I explained who I was and what was happening, there was a long silence on the other end. "Meet me at the Starbucks on 16th Street, she said finally. "Come alone and don't tell anyone where you're going." Quinn was nothing like I expected. Mid-40s, professionally dressed, with tired eyes that had seen too much. She slid a manila envelope across the table to me. "I've been documenting everything for 3 years, she said quietly. "Every vindictive order, every life he's destroyed, every company he's purchased just to shut down out of spite. I've been waiting for the right person to help me stop him." "Why haven't you gone to the authorities?" "Because he owns half the authorities. Judges, politicians, police commissioners. You don't get this rich without buying protection." She leaned forward. "But you saved his life. That gives you something none of his other victims had." "What's that?" "Access. He's obsessed with you now. He'll want to see your final destruction personally." She was right. 2 days later, I received a call from Blackwood's office. He wanted to meet with me. "To discuss your situation," his secretary said. I walked into his downtown office carrying a digital recorder in my purse and Quinn's evidence files in my bag. Blackwood sat behind a desk that probably cost more than most people's houses, looking supremely confident. "Celeste," he said with a cold smile, "I trust you're enjoying your new circumstances. You're destroying my family because I saved your life. I'm teaching you a lesson about consequences. You made me vulnerable. You humiliated me in front of strangers. Actions have consequences." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "So you admit you're systematically destroying innocent people's lives out of petty revenge." He laughed and pulled out his own recording device. "You think you're the first person to try this?" He pressed play, and I heard my own voice from 3 days after the incident. Maybe I should have let him choke. I'd said those words to Win in a moment of desperate anger, not knowing that Blackwood had already placed surveillance on our apartment. "Everyone shows their true nature when pushed," Blackwood said. "You're no different." But I smiled back at him. "Did you record yourself saying that?" His confidence flickered. "Because Quinn's been recording everything for 3 years, every vindictive order, every life you've destroyed, every admission of guilt." I pulled out the manila envelope. "The FBI is very interested in patterns of criminal harassment and corporate extortion." For the first time since I'd known him, Donovan Blackwood looked genuinely afraid. "What do you want?" "I want you to remember what it feels like to need someone's mercy." Donovan Blackwood stared at those FBI documents for a full minute before he spoke again. When he finally looked up, something had changed in his eyes. The cold calculation was still there, but underneath it, I saw something I didn't expect: defeat. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want Harmony Medical Research fully funded. I want every person whose life you've destroyed to get their opportunities back. I want you to face consequences for once in your privileged life." He nodded slowly, like a man signing his own surrender. "And in return, I give you something you've never had to ask for before: mercy." Within 48 hours, Harmony Medical Research received an anonymous donation of $50 million. Zara's treatment resumed immediately. The other 16 victims of Blackwood's revenge campaigns started receiving mysterious job offers, loan approvals, and opportunities that rebuilt what he'd torn down. Wynn got a call from a record label that wanted to sign Midnight Theories. Mrs. Patterson received an offer to buy back her building at twice what she'd sold it for. But the real change came 6 months later when Blackwood showed up at my new restaurant, Zara's Kitchen, which I'd opened with the settlement money from our agreement. He looked older, more tired, but somehow less frightening. "How is she?" he asked, nodding toward the photo of Zara on the wall. She was in full remission by then, her hair growing back in beautiful dark curls. "She's good. She's 8 years old and she's alive, and that's everything." He sat down in a booth and ordered black coffee, just like that first night. But this time, when I brought it over, he said, "Thank you." "I've been seeing a therapist," he said without preamble, "trying to understand why I became the kind of person who punishes mercy with cruelty." I sat down across from him. "And what did you learn?" "That when I was 7 years old, my mother saved a drowning man at the beach. He sued her for breaking his ribs during CPR and took everything we had. My father left us that winter. I learned early that no good deed goes unpunished." "So you decided to be the one doing the punishing?" "I told myself I was just protecting myself, getting to people before they could get to me." He sipped his coffee. "But really, I was just a scared little boy who grew up into a powerful, vindictive man." We sat in silence for a moment, then he pulled out an envelope. "I've established the Zara Rivera Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research. Quinn is running it. She quit working for me to do something that actually helps people instead of destroying them." "Why are you doing this?" "Because you saved my life twice, once from choking and once from becoming a monster I couldn't live with." He stood up to leave. "I'm trying to learn what mercy looks like. It's harder than I expected." After he left, I found myself thinking about the lesson my daughter had taught me during her darkest days in treatment. When other kids were scared and crying, Zara would share her coloring books and tell them jokes. Even while fighting for her own life, she chose kindness. I realized that night that saving Donovan Blackwood hadn't been about him at all. It had been about who I wanted to be when faced with the choice between mercy and vengeance. I wanted to be the kind of person my daughter could be proud of, even if it cost me everything. They say no good deed goes unpunished, but I learned something different. Sometimes the punishment isn't for doing good. It's for all the times we chose not to. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, mercy wins anyway. 1 year later, Zara's still cancer-free, Wynn's band has their first album coming out, and 17 people have their lives back. Sometimes doing the right thing really does pay off. You just have to be willing to pay the price first.